Hi, I'm Scott Davidson from Player Unknown Productions. We are building massive open worlds with machine learning. Yeah, so some scary stuff. So, what I want to talk to you about today is how art in games is different than every other art form, and that's important for artists, especially new artists coming into the industry. So, um, there are lots of things that make it different, but one of the main things is focal point. Yeah. So in most visual art forms, including film, comics, photography, painting, the focal point is fixed within the frame and the viewer has no control over the frame. In film, the focal point can change within each shot and shift with camera movement by changing the camera settings in each shot. In comics, the focus can shift with each panel and the transition between each panel can branch and change if the team is skillful. But at all times, the focal point is controlled by the artist. So what is focal point? So here's a nice piece of landscape art. So if you track your eye across that and kind of think of where your eye is kind of drawn to, if it matches this, then the artist has done their job. Yeah. And it's not just a point in space that they want you to look at, they want you to be drawn to different points and go on a little journey within the piece. So he's probably done his job there. There are 7 of the most important, prominent things that the eye likes. Yeah. All of these, in my mind, come to what we call appeal. So these are the things that, when you're looking at the appeal to you, yeah, and draw your attention. So this is all the things that should be in your focal point. Um, uh, so the focal point isn't just wherever the eye chooses to see in paintings. We don't want the eye to just choose to see it, what to look for. On the contrary, it's the painter's responsibility to direct the eye, to orchestrate its movement within the painting through the use of linear paths. After the artist has manipulated, I don't like that word, it's bad, the viewer, they reward them using some or all of these elements mentioned. So obviously, if you look at like the painter, replace that with team. So here's Rembrandt. Um, if you look at this painting, you can see some of these things here. I mean, he's even got a little arrow underneath his chin, pointed to his face as the focal point, as the start point. And your eye should move down here to the body because you've got these kind of contrasts with the high contrast with the red there, and then up to these guys. None of whom are looking at the body. They're all looking at different directions. They've all got something interesting to say about. He's definitely looking at us. Um, he's definitely looking at the doctor. This guy's looking at the there. Some of them are looking off camera, but like I spent a long time looking at this painting. Then you've got photography. So this is Annie Leibovitz. This is Alexander McQueen's last collection of fashion. You know, this is just after he died. So you can see here the similar thing where there's the contrast with the face and the darkness here and here, which draws your eye here, and then down and across, and little spooky character there. So this is kind of a good arc there. Comics. This is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. It's a really good book. I would recommend artists or non-artists get this if you kind of like want to know why comics is a great art form. Is a proper art form. It'll really teach you why it is good. But you can see here kind of an excerpt from it where you've got what we call sequential art, each panel and how the panels transition. So you've got movement to movement, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, aspect to aspect, and the non sequitur. So something that has no relevance at all. And there's Richard Nixon. So this is something else Scott McCloud said in a talk with Will Wright. You probably recognize his name. He did Sims and like a bunch of other games. So he's a smart guy. And they had a talk at GDC years ago. And Scott McCloud, he proposed that games as an art form is the sort of the next pinnacle, of entertainment in an art form, because every other art form is trying to put time in a box, a moment in time, or within a film, 2 hours of someone's life, or a book, all of these do the same thing, whereas we don't have that. we let players free within an environment to explore at their own leisure. So then you got film, arguably the last great art form before ours. There's a problem with film and us because there's a lot of people in our industry who secretly want to make films. Yeah, and they should probably go and make films because games are not films. There are things we can learn from films, but a lot of people get hung up with this quite badly, and you get stuff like this, which the film was fine, the film was okay, but it wasn't about video games. It was about nostalgia for old films. So it kind of didn't really do what it should do, really, if you're going to celebrate a virtual world. You know, you look at it like there were barely any video game characters in it or video game worlds in it. It was focused on kind of like things that had passed. Yeah. So this is kind of, I think, one medium kind of like not really understanding the next one. Yeah. And then you might ask yourself the question, well, why are there no good video game film adaptations? And my answer would be that who cares? Who cares? You know, let's not look back, let's look forward. Yeah. So the last two art forms are probably more, I think, are more relevant, really, to us, because they're in 3 dimensions, and the viewer, the person who's kind of interacting with them, can walk around and they can explore and they can touch. Sculpture is good. This is the Cloud Gate in Chicago by Nish Kapoor, and then architecture. And I would expand this to town planning. People who plan how cities run, yeah, because they're dealing with people, and that's what we deal with all the time. So this is the Valley, which is opening in Amsterdam in July, and this is kind of like supposedly the next kind of concept of what like urban living should be. The building is open to everybody, so you can just walk in. There's no security. You can go around. There are people who live there in their apartments, but there are restaurants, there are businesses, there are bars and nightclubs, and there are parks to sit in and eat your lunch and have meetings. And it's very open and free. And you know, I think architecture is something that we should look more at. So then going back to those 2 first slides with focal point, and ask yourself the question, but at all times the focal point is controlled by the artist. We do not control the focal point. Yeah, we have no control over that. You might say, okay, some games you do. Yes, you do. Super Smash Brothers, Hearthstone, fixed camera perspective. Super Smash Brothers, the camera will zoom out and zoom in depending on kind of how far the characters are out, but essentially it's a fixed perspective and a fixed point. But I would say let's not get hung up on that, because you know there's the origin of those games. Yeah, let's not look at FIFA 2023 and see if it's going to break the boundaries. It's not going to. We have to look forward. So who decides what the focal point is? Well, essentially, you could say, well, the game design team, they write a GDD. But essentially, it's the player goals. The player goals define what you should be looking at any one time. So we can look at Half-Life 2, which is arguably a great game. And we can kind of break that down a little bit into its parts and say, like, okay, what's important here? So long-term, mid-term, and short-term goals. Long-term goal, if you played the game, what is that big tower? And kind of hinting that you're going to go to that big tower towards the end of the game. Mid-term goals, I want to get to the next section and see what happens. Short-term goals, I must survive to progress and not lose progress, because I want to see what comes next. So you look at long-term goals. This is one of the first things you see. You see the tower. It's big. It's framed nicely. Obviously, you need to look in that direction, but arguably, if you didn't see that tower when you first came out of the train station, I don't know what you're doing. So you already know where your kind of end point is. Then you got midterm goals. This is a lot of games do this, but arguably Half-Life was one of the first ones that did it. So you've got the aquamarine doorway, yeah, and this is one of the first ones you come to where you see there's some guards. So if you think back on the kind of most important things, there are people in front of it, so your eye is drawn to it. Also, we have that extra ability to have movement, so we can have these these guys moving. So you're drawn to it. You don't want to go close to it because the guys are dangerous. You wait till they move, then you move through the aquamarine door. You might go to another aquamarine door, slightly less contrasted aquamarine door, but it's still an aquamarine door. And then there's Barney, and then you come around and you'll see the tower again. So it keeps it in your head, long-term goals. This is one of my favorite ones. So good. This is a section where you have no gun, you just have your crowbar and you're being shot. So you're trying to run away and you kind of don't know where to go. And it's framed so perfectly. It's got an aquamarine door. It's got the surrounding area is very dark. And then the surrounding area that surrounds the darkness and the door has got like really straight lines and is bright. So everything is pulling you towards that. Yeah. And then your short-term goals, which are arguably, not die. So you need health and you need ammo to shoot the guys, and eventually bigger and better weapons. So you've got more detail in these pickups. There's interaction, so when you smash them, they open up. Even the position of that is a sort of different angle than everything else. Everything else is kind of like at a quite sort of isometric angle, and it's just off angle when you come to it, and it's slightly in the shadow on one section. And you cannot avoid this. It's the first ones you find. I don't particularly like the kind of the graffiti Half-Life symbol. I think it's the equivalent of like when they put a voiceover on Blade Runner. It's not necessarily needed, but I get it. Yeah, so it's fine. But again, this is really well framed. This is where a lot of people go wrong. So you've got a health station. It's great because it's got animation when you come up close to it, so you kind of get a satisfaction. And you look at the wall behind. I guarantee you that the guy, most artists who did the wall behind the texture of that surface want to put that hard work into that surface and really go to town and make it the best stone painted whitewashed wall anyone's ever seen. It doesn't matter. The point is that there needs to be contrast between those two different things, and if you put all the detail into that wall, like the actual thing that's important would be less seen. Yeah. It helps that the texture detail is very low because this is an older game and they put a lot more texel density in here, which some people would not like, but I think that's fine. If you were doing this in a newer game, possibly you would make the wall a lot more detailed, and then you might have sort of a section of stucco around the outside to break the frame. Yeah, that would work. So we can move on to Elden Ring. So this is like nearly 20 years later, and you only really need to have one frame to kind of show you what they've done. And I saw this screenshot and I was like, this is going to be fine. This is going to be an awesome game. And the reason why, you look at it like carefully, everything is in that one shot. Yeah, this is after you've done the tutorial, you come out the doorway and you're presented with the world. You've got everything in here. Short-term goals. You could argue that most games short-term goals is getting health, but you don't actually get health here. You have all the health you need. So the short-term goals is finding one of them things so I don't die, so I can save my progress and I don't lose stuff. Midterm goals: find a doorway to go through to see if there's some people in there to talk to, or some things to do, or a boss to kill. And then long-term goals: huge, massive freaking tree that you know is important, that you know is the purpose of the game, and there's even an arc that goes to that. Yeah. This made me laugh. This is the opposite of what we want to be doing. Yeah. This was on Reddit. This was like someone saying kind of, this is what Elden Ring could have been like. And I laughed a lot at this. I even like this. Maybe I should investigate that cave. Elden Ring has changed a lot of people's opinions about what should be in games. It's pared down massively. The map only has the kind of save points on it, and you have to add anything you want on there. And arguably, you have kind of little the map points where you can go and get the maps. Apart from that, there's nothing there. Yeah, they're happy to let you miss things all the time, and I think that's totally fine. So this will be the next. This is going to be a longer talk eventually, but this is the next part of it that I would do. So what we're doing is something very different. So what if the players set their own goals and the goals of each other? Yeah. So that is one of the big things that we'll be exploring in the work we're doing, mostly through emergent gameplay, and our players' ability to sort of do what they really want within an open world. But my struggle now and my kind of like challenge is, how do you do that? Yeah, the two games I've showed you, very different games, but both of them kind of control the world a little bit. Yeah, that nice, like Elden Ring shows you these huge big places that you're going to go to. You can't miss them. And Half-Life is a very linear game that kind of sort of guides you through the place. What if there isn't that? Yeah. What if the goals are up to the player? So how do we make art good and relevant? So that's kind of it, really. I will be at the Indigo Showcase on June 17th, doing a talk about imposter syndrome, which some people may struggle with, and I'll talk about kind of how you can deal with that. And then we will also be at Gamescom. A lot of the team will be there, so if you see us, you can come and say hello. If you don't know, we're in Amsterdam. It's a lovely city. Our team is very small, so you know, we won't be growing to be more than 50 to 60 people. So it's a really nice place to live. These are details. We have so many job openings at the moment, and Natalia is available to talk to you. And there's guys from our tech department as well, and our research department, if you're interested in talking to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, for an excellent presentation. I think we can take 1 or 2 questions. Let's see how fast we can do it. How relevant do you think the cultural immersion in the world of game someone's playing?
The culture immersion, that's actually something that I'm looking at the moment. So within our kind of world, the thinking is that every region in the world has a very different look to it, and that might have a cultural identity that you might identify with. Yeah. So I think that like it's a big deal going forward. I think the more we can kind of encourage players to come to our game because they see something in themselves with what we're doing, the better, really. I think it's super important.
Thank you very much, Scott. There's more questions coming in, but
okay.
I copied some of the questions. I'll pass them to you. But for you attendees and talents joining the session, if you have more questions for Scott, and please go and put those questions to the virtual stand, because then there's an opportunity for Scott to take a look at those questions and respond to those later. With that being said, I would like to thank you very much, Scott, for the excellent presentation. And I would like to encourage everyone now to go to the company stands. We have the live session starting at the company stands now. Thank you. Thank you.